Hi, everybody. We're ready for our next panel. Dan FIDEN's going to talk to us about managing success. And if anybody should know about it, it's Dan. So, well, we'll see. I'm sure you know something. Yeah. Just to give you a little bit about his background, Dan knows, he does know jack about this business because he was a creative director on You Don't Know Jack, back for Jellyvision. He also worked for WMS Gaming, so he has a background in real money casino gaming and really understands that space. He was a GM at Playfish, which was acquired by EA, and that's where I believe he met Rick Thompson. I think that's a picture of Rick Thompson's garage. Is that right? He's also on the board of Idle Games, which is a really great gaming company, which has an amazing poker game. Kihon, Super Evil Mega Corporation, Mind Pirate, and Grow Mobile. He's going to talk to us today about exits and liquidity for founders, if there's such a thing. Dan, it's all yours.
Is this, hello? Can people hear me? Hi. Hey, also one other thing on the resume that's new. So I'm still a venture partner with Signia and involved with the fund, do game stuff for them. But I just recently took a job working for Will Harbin at Kixeye. I'm wearing my gang colors today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about liquidity and the social casino space and how the social casino market is evolving. I'm going to try to get finished pretty quickly, take some questions, and then hand it over to Jeff, who's coming on after me, because he has a really, really terrific presentation filled with actual kind of operational data on Fresh Tech Poker, and I personally think it's a great presentation. Anyway, so managing success. Over the course of the past year or so, we've seen a number of social casino exits. Real money companies, obviously, like IGT, have made some investments in this space. Companies like Zynga, who hadn't had a real money background, made some investments in the space, and a number of companies have gotten into the space. I think because of the perception of or at least the superficial perception that these games are generally easy to make, they monetize pretty efficiently. And so right now I think we have a dynamic where there are a lot of companies out there that are good cash flow businesses and they're looking for exits, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. If I could advance the slide, how do I do that? Oh no, here it is. Cool. So social casino, it got a track at Casual Connect for a reason. Over the course of the past 2 years, you've seen a lot of companies grow up from kind of full stop to tens of millions of dollars in revenue run rate. They're profitable businesses. They reach a wide audience, but they monetize more efficiently, generally speaking, than other kind of core casual games. Whoops. Sorry, this is a kludgy thing. So we already talked a little bit about my background. So social casino successes to date. This is really kind of just restating some of the things we've already talked about. Relatively low barrier to entry technically. There are certainly some challenging genres of social casino game out there and some specific challenges within the category. Scaling to massive amounts of players for any kind of multiplayer game is challenging. That certainly applies to bingo. It most definitely applies to a kind of direct PvP game like poker or a card game. But you know, generally speaking, these are relatively low barrier to entry games technically. Like I said, there's a large addressable market. These are games that are widely known. So generally speaking, your CPIs, at least in the beginning of the market, are going to be a little lower than what you'd find for a much more hardcore game. they're not especially content consumptive. So again, this varies a little bit based on the specific genre. In many of the slot games that are out there, for example, people are releasing new slot themes on a regular basis. That's certainly content consumption. But again, you're not building a massive content pipeline in the way that you are for many much more hardcore games, for example, for simulation games, like we used to do at Playfish. Generally speaking, I think the content treadmill is a little lower. And as I said earlier, they monetize efficiently relative to other games that appeal to the same kind of audience broadly. So my experience has been, on Facebook, mass market casual games, the kind of games that appeal to, the kind of stereotypical casual game audience of kind of women from 25 to, 65. You'll see ARPDAUs for those games on Facebook net of, 1 to 5 cents. On iOS, they'll be 5 cents to 10 cents. And my experience has been social casino games that appeal to the same audience will monetize at least twice that. And again, varies a little bit by the specific genre of game that you're making. But all of these things kind of combine to create a market where you have a lot of small companies out there who are running at better than 30% margins, sometimes much, much better than 30% margins. So it's a pretty attractive business for developers to get into. The risks to the market that exist now and I think will continue to get worse over the next year. It is a relatively low barrier to entry technically, and so that means lots of competitors. People who fail in other genres like to go into social casino right now. And there is no technical defensibility. The incumbents, both on the real money gambling side, on the traditional video game side, and the more traditional social game side, they all are cognizant of the market. Kabam made a slot game last year, for example. Companies that you wouldn't naturally think would be inclined to address this market, or at least toying with the idea. All of the competition, especially the competition from incumbents in other categories, are driving CPIs up, right? It's more expensive to buy these customers than it had been in the past. And the content is highly commoditized. Now, there probably are people out there who make these games that are going to be irritated that I've said this, but there is not a huge differentiation from one bingo game to the other. I think generally there are certain games that do certain things better. Some are higher quality bar than others. I have seen data among companies where they are cross-promoting very similar reskin games in the same category, one app to the other, with 15% impression to install efficacy, which is really quite high, and they're not cannibalizing one another. So what all of this means to me is players are not particularly picky about which game they're playing. They're playing lots of games at once, and they're kind of playing them all in parallel. That can be great if you have a lot of scale and you have the ability to make a lot of those games at once, but if you really are a kind of 20-person company and you can kind of operate one game at a time, it can be a challenge, and it can mean that your users are not as loyal as, for example, someone who plays kickside game War Commander, for example, and they're going to invest a couple years into that. So, in summary, competition is getting more intense. The costs of making these games, buying customers for these games, and operating these games are increasing, and the margins are getting slimmer. Here's a fake history I put together of the social casino space that kind of illustrates where I think the category is going and why this is potentially dangerous for folks who are getting into it right now or who have a company at kind of medium scale. Got 2010, Startup One. They were funded to make mid-core games on Facebook. So they launched War of Kingdoms. They had 10 people. They made no money, and they lost some money on it. They were nearly out of money, so in 2011 they saw that some folks like Buffalo Studios had great success with bingo, and they decided to make bingo bar mitzvah. They shed some employees, but they made a lot of money, and they've got a great kind of bottom line business. What are they going to do with that $5 million that they made? They're going to take it to iOS. So now they've got the same game on Facebook and iOS, and that's what they did over the course of 2012. You can see that their margins have decreased pretty substantially. And their big plan for 2013 is to make a slot game and to launch both their bingo and their slot on Facebook, Android, and iOS. They now have 70 employees, revenue in the neighborhood of $8 million, and are losing about $1 million a year. Startup 2, very similar story. They were a mobile phone company, made a farm management game. That didn't work, so they decided to make Slotsissippi, which if any of you take that name, I will be litigious. 7 million. This is a pretty similar kind of a story. A lot of companies at this size, making about $500,000 a month for that year, reinvesting, getting that game cross-platform, and their plan for 2013 is to have a slot game and a bingo game on Facebook, iOS, and Android. Looks pretty similar to Company 1. Now they're directly competitive. They have roughly the same scale. They have the same product slate, and it's going to be a challenge. And then you've got a big strategic casino gambling company who in 2010 made 48 slot machines that they sold to all kinds of casinos. They've got 4,000 employees. They made $2 billion, and they made $100 million. In 2011, they made another 48 slot machines. And this year wasn't quite as good. 2012, they decided they were going to put the 20 best of those slot games onto Facebook and deploy some of those 4,000 people against it. And in 2013, they're gonna make a bingo game as well. If you imagine this scenario playing out over the course of this year and next year, which is I think it's kind of what's happening, I think you have a lot of founders of companies that are making $20 to $50 million who are realizing, gosh, this is going to get way harder before it gets easier, and I need to look for an exit. So you're thinking about taking money off the table, and you're trying to figure out how to do it. One of the things that I would encourage any entrepreneur to really think about before they take investment, before they start a company, is what your number is. This isn't something to kind of, beat up forever, but my friend John Erner, who I worked at Playfish with, pointed me to this blog post, and I thought it was really thoughtful. It kind of outlines this thing called the freedom line, which is really the amount of money that you need in order to be able to do whatever you want for the rest of your life. Maybe not fly around like Puff Daddy, but to not have to worry about what your next job is, to do something that you're passionate about. For most people, that's not all that much money, actually. Have this conversation with your family, your co-founders, and your investors. I think the script that people like to run when they are looking for investment or when they're founding a company, especially in Silicon Valley, is I want to make this into the next Facebook and become a billionaire. But I think in reality, that isn't the case for most people. And that doesn't have to be the case. I think as long as your co-founders and your family and your investors understand kind of what scale of business you want to build, there are ways to solve for that, both in how you structure investment, how you build out the company, and how much time you allocate to the company for your family's sake. So some options that are out there. Clearly, these are things that probably most of you have thought about. I want to spend most of my time talking about the last couple. Trade sale. So I put this together really quickly. I haven't captured every trade sale in the industry over the course of the past couple of years, but I think the big ones, and these numbers are taken from various blogs like TechCrunch and things like that. So the Playtika, the first half of the Playtika deal, the revenue run rate that was reported for the company at that point, when Caesars bought 51%, was about $1.5 million a year. So if you think about what the revenue multiple there was, it's about 60x. they consummated the rest of that deal about a year later. IGT was purchased for $500 million. The revenue that was kind of reported at that time was about $90 million. That's a substantially lower revenue multiple. We're dealing with larger numbers, so that's helpful. Helpful for the double down guys anyway. But it's a lower multiple. The Aristocrat Product Madness deal, again, these are kind of the numbers that were reported. 4x multiple. Caesar's Buffalo, maybe a 2x, 1.5, 2x. I don't know if anybody here wants to confirm those numbers. But generally speaking, I think along with the rest of the game industry, we're seeing revenue multiples erode in these trade sales. There's a lot of product. If you're out there buying companies, there's a lot of product on the market. You have a lot of options, so you don't need to pay as much. And there are a lot of founders who are really eager to, I think, get out and find some liquidity. So what are the advantages of a trade sale? I think ultimately it allows you to maximize the cash value of something you haven't executed yet. You can sell the dream of what your unreleased iOS Facebook or unreleased iOS slot game is going to be without actually having to deliver the revenue. And if it's your cup of tea, it allows you to kind of provide to play an important role in a company that wants to transition into a new market, which can be exciting for some people. It also, I think, saying that you sold your company for tens of millions of dollars is a big feather in your cap, and VCs, investors, all kinds of investors generally like to see that when they're financing your next company. But you give up your independence. What are your expectations here? 5x or less of your top line, kind of annualized top line, and generally a big earnout. Secondary sale. So we've seen a couple of these over the course of the year. Outside of the social casino space, most notably Supercell and Kabam. Supercell's secondary was at a $770 million valuation, which was based on the reported revenue numbers, less than 2x their annualized revenue. But again, it was a lot of money, and it allowed a lot of employees to kind of de-risk themselves. What's nice about a secondary sale is it allows employees to pay off their house or pay off their car or whatever the scale of the deal is, while investors can still let it ride and try and get the 10x return on these investments that they like to see. And it enables a founding team that maybe is worried about swinging for the fences to do so without worrying they're going to sacrifice everything. Some disadvantages, the valuation is going to be lower than you'd see in a trade sale because the people who are investing in the company in the secondary need to get a return on that investment themselves. If you don't manage it well, it can create dissension between founders and other employees. So apparently what Supercell did was they allowed everyone at the company to sell 16% of their vested equity, which is a really nice way to manage it, I think. There are other companies that just kind of do secondaries just for founders, and generally employees find out about that and they're maybe not thrilled. Expectations, much lower. Shareholder distribution. This is an option that, as the kind of trade sale market, if it continues to be cool, I think this is something that companies really should consider, especially great cash flow companies like some of these smaller social casino companies. You don't have to just let that money sit in a bank. You don't necessarily have to invest that into making another game if you don't want to. If you feel like the money that people will spend on your company is not attractive, and you aren't necessarily interested in taking on secondary investment, do a distribution to all your shareholders, employees and founders, and if you have any existing investors. The risks here, obviously, it reduces your cushion from a company perspective, and depending on where you live, it can have some tax issues. And bonuses, again, this is something that it's a little surprising to me that more entrepreneurs who are in this kind of position of having a small company, they're not entirely sure how to scale it, they can't figure out how to sell it, but they have a bunch of money coming in. It frequently doesn't occur to these people to just pay themselves a lot of money. You should. I would encourage folks to think about things like that, or hopefully bonus programs for the entire company that allow them to kind of see some cash and participate in the upside without, don't feel like you have to sell your company to get liquidity. So that's kind of the end of the story. And then, the last slide, really, there's nothing on it. Is it time? I mean, this is a very personal question for folks who are out there running companies. But it's a combination of how much risk are you willing to kind of take on as you take your company to the next level, and do you really think that you're going to be able to compete with the additional competitors you're going to have in this category over the course of the next year? So that's kind of it for me. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah?
I sold my studio in Vancouver 11 years ago and retired. But being a Canadian, it's a lot easier to get assets into a place with a low profile.
Yeah.
What do you have any advice for Americans that want to sell companies? Because in the United States, we should tax on citizenship, not residence. Did you run into these problems?
No, I didn't run into these problems. There are better people in the audience to kind of advise on that. But the tax issues that I brought up here are non-trivial, and they vary pretty substantially based on where the company is incorporated. I have heard, I don't know this to be the truth, but I've heard that one of the main drivers of the supercell secondary was doing a cash, kind of distributing some of the cash they had built up was going to have a much less favorable tax treatment for them because they're a Finnish company than the secondary did. Nothing else? Okay, thanks.